Okay, good.
Hi, Dave.
Well, it's a funny thing with Martha because we worked on her for a long time. I mean, we did the first one, must be 20 years ago, I would think. And we've done long stories, short stories, one-offs. But we've really come to the end of her story because the first issue starts with her being born, and we always knew that the last issue she had to die. So that was a given. Whether we'll do any stories to fit in between, we haven't got any plans at the moment. But in the past, we've filled in history, so we may well do that. But for the moment, that is the complete Martha. Everything that's ever been published in order, so you can read it as one story. I'm a great advocate of free speech. I mean, if you can't speak freely, I don't consider society to be a proper civilization, you know. And there are problems in some parts of the states, in some of the less progressive or less open-minded states, where comic book store owners have had problems with the local authorities because of the material they're selling. And you know, they need defending, you know, and it could bankrupt a small comic book store. So I think that's very important. It's also very important for the medium as well, that if you're going to consider comics as being a grown-up medium, there's no reason to treat them differently than any other medium. You know, you can buy a book talking about whatever you want to put in a book, so there's no reason why you shouldn't buy a comic. It's up to the retailer to sell them responsibly. You know, there's certain things as a parent I wouldn't like my son to read when he's 7 years old, but I'd be quite happy for him to read when he was 12 or 13. So really, it's the comic industry getting together to provide a fund that the people who are at the kind of cutting edge of it, who are actually at the front, can draw on if they need to defend the right of free speech. With Watchmen, there was no censorship. I mean, we had full frontal male nudity, and this was in the mid '80s, and nobody, you know, everybody seems very amused by it in the movie, but we never had a censorship problem with that, or with Martha Washington. I don't know that there's any nudity in it, but there's adult language, you know, which is fine. So what I consider my kind of personal work, I've never been censored on. Alan and Frank work in quite different ways. Alan, I've sort of compared him to like a composer of classical music, like Mozart. And he hears the whole symphony and he puts the whole symphony down. But before he does that, we would speak for 4 hours on the phone. Like a whole half a day we'd just be talking about it, and we'd talk about all kinds of things that weren't particularly related, but then we'd come back and realise that they were related. So it was a really interesting collaborative thing to do. He would then write a full script that I would then draw. So he'd write it and I'd draw it. With Frank, a little bit different. I compare him to like a great jazz player like Miles Davis or something, who would go off on a riff. And he would quite often add pages in or take sequences out, or I'd rough the whole thing out and say, oh, maybe there's a better way to do this, or he would look at it and say, oh, we need 2 more pages. So that was a different kind of collaboration. And it was an interesting experience. I enjoyed working with the people that I worked with, but I found it a little bit restricting because it did have to tie in with a lot of other things. We got really rolling though. Me and Jeff Johns, we got on very well together, and we actually kind of kicked this whole war thing off, you know, because ideas that I had in Green Lantern Corps fitted with ideas he had for the main book. But I knew I was going to leave the book after a year or so, you know, because I wanted to go and pursue other things. But again, I'm very lucky. I mean, Patrick Gleason, who's the artist, fantastic artist. He really made it something special. So yeah, overall it was a good experience. Not quite the experience I thought it would be, but you know, as a comic fan, that's what it feels like. I've got a very good relationship with DC, and I always have had a very good relationship with them, and if an interesting project came up, I could very easily be tempted. And obviously when I get a creator-owned thing going, and I'm working on a few things at the moment, I would talk to the people at DC, but it's strange. I worked a lot for DC. I've hardly ever worked for Marvel, not because there's any problem between me and Marvel, but as a kid I was always much more of a DC fan, and I've always sort of gravitated towards them. So, but no, there are some interesting opportunities, so I'll have to see what's happening. Well, I've got a story idea that I've been kind of developing for a while, and I was asked to contribute to a Dark Horse Comics anthology, Dark Horse Presents, which is the title that Hellboy started in, Sin City started in, and there's going to be some really top-line people contributing to it. So what I've done is I put my ideas together, and I've done like a little fragment of a story, a little teaser, so that's coming out quite soon. I'm working on that at the moment. I'm also looking forward at some point in the future to working with Mark Miller. You know, we said we wanted to work together for a while, but of course he's been really busy this year, and you know, he can only write so much good stuff, you know, and he's very sensible because he doesn't try and take on the world. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. And I've got some other story ideas. I'm working on a game with a friend of mine. There's a company called Revolution Software, and I worked on a game with them in the 90s called Beneath the Steel Sky. That was, as I understand it, has become sort of a classic of adventure games. You know, it's a point and click thing, and they repurposed that for the iPhone. And it was really successful. So then they redid Broken Sword, and they're doing the next Broken Sword as well. So it now makes sense to do things for what they call the casual gamer market, because so many people have got mobile phones, and you're not trying to do the next big electronic arts blockbuster. You're doing a game that's fun to play, but it's fairly small, and you can do it with a small development team, which I really love. It's one of the things I love about comics. There's only a few people. It's not like making a movie where there's all the technicians, all the equipment. So I've got input on the story, and I'm doing art for it as well. My understanding is that they're not going to do any spin-offs. Certainly Alan wouldn't be involved with them, and I wouldn't be involved with them either. You know, in the past they've kind of left Watchmen alone, and I think that has been the right decision. I was quite happy to explore the idea because you know, I have got a good relationship with DC Comics. I was quite happy to talk to them and see if there was any way that everybody could be made happy, but as it transpires, there wasn't. So as far as I know, that's it.
My name is Simon Wormula, and I'm from Sweden. The comic I brought with me is called Watchmen. It's a parody of the very well-known Watchmen comic by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons.
It's a very funny comic, and I'm just flattered that people think it's worth satirising. I also love what Mad Magazine did as well, and Glenn Fabry aped my style, and all the faults in my work he absolutely nailed. And they did a nice version of the movie, a nice movie spoof in Mad Magazine, and I did a cover for them as well. So yeah, I'm all for a bit of humour.